You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. On this episode, we are discussing Humane Meat, the Flensing of Sandor Katz, track 6 from Supporting Caste. And as you all heard before the episode started just now, you heard the intro sound effect. And I found a really funny quote from Todd where he said that's someone cutting bread and some fake screaming over it for a laugh. And Sandor Katz wrote a book and Chris read it. It makes light of the idea of humanely killing animals. And so we just kind of removed the animal, put him in place for satirical reasons just to show that clearly this isn't humane. So that's sort of like the gist of the song, and the point sort of boiled down right in the beginning. But do you remember the other day whenever I sent you that audio recording of me slicing a baguette?
It sounded just like the intro of the song without the screaming.
Yeah. So here is my version of the intro. Okay, so I just put that in there for a laugh. I love doing that. That was a good time. So here we are. We're going to talk about the Flensing of Sandor Katz.
Yeah, and if anyone isn't sure what it means to flens, I'm sure this is a word used a lot in Game of Thrones, I seem to remember reading. It means to slice the skin or fat from a carcass, especially that of a whale, or to strip skin or fat from a carcass.
I feel that no matter what we say about diet and food and vegetarianism and veganism and eating animals in this episode, I feel like no matter what, this will anger, frustrate, and disappoint many, many listeners. So I'm really looking forward to that today. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, food is our culture and our history and our memories and shared experiences and things we enjoy, and we find our identity in that. And I think there's kind of no easy way to talk about something, especially in a song that is somewhat divisive or intentionally divisive, right? Since it's kind of drawing the line. So I agree, especially again looking at YouTube comments and seeing perhaps maybe more non-propaganda fans commenting. There's just kind of no easy way to talk about food.
Well, so maybe we should start by something simple. Maybe talking about our own diets for a second. Keith, tell me a little bit about your diet and your dietary choices.
Yeah, I'm a vegetarian. I'm not a vegan. I'm a vegetarian. I've been so for just over 10 years. In college, I went to a conference in San Francisco with a good friend of mine, Jeff, who is vegetarian. And I thought, well, what better place and time to give it a go during that week? Partly because I respected him so much. And I saw it as a way to also explore new food. And plus San Francisco, there are just a ton of amazing options. And not long before that trip, I was kind of a condescending person regarding food, which looking back on just sucks, because for me, like most of my life, food has been a luxury and not a necessity. So I had this actually sort of counter, and, I had to critique, anything that people might say that would have challenged, my diet. And, that's something that I inherited. I didn't, come to that conclusion. I didn't reflect and think critically about what I was eating and why, and the social and racial and environmental consequences of my diet, what they were then and still are now. So I stopped eating meat after I got back from San Francisco, and I continued. But then I mentioned before, I was a Peace Corps volunteer. So I lived in Ukraine for 2 years, and I felt really uneasy about telling my host families that I wouldn't eat something that they made for me, as a guest in their home, due to a relatively recent, revelation or conviction. So I did eat meat in Ukraine, And then when I got back from Peace Corps, I kind of overindulged at a Super Bowl party of all places, which is funny. If you know me, I don't know anything about sports. And then I just didn't feel well. So I decided to take a break just because just ate a bunch of hamburgers and didn't feel well. And then I kind of stuck with it since then for the last decade. How about you, Greg?
So I grew up in a very barbecue centric family.
Yeah.
My entire life, like literally 3 meals a day for my entire youth was spent. Like the meat was the center of the plate. Essentially, it was, the quintessential meal that is described in all these documentaries that are out today, where the meat is the center of the plate, and instead it should be a side on the plate if you're consuming it within reason. But mine was like, I was the 21-ounce Outback Steakhouse guy for years and years. And like I would go to like a bar in St. Louis called Poor Richard's, and I would get like the 50 bucket of wings, and I would eat like literally 50 chicken wings in a single sitting. It was ridiculous. And like I worked at a pizza restaurant. And so I would get like the Meat Lovers St. Louis style thin crust pizza at my job. And that was just how it was forever. I went to college at Mizzou, and like they had these amazing dining halls, and I would just eat like the double cheeseburger with like the pepperoni and sausage pizza. And so, well into my early 20s, I wasn't thinking about this like whatsoever. And then I moved out of the country to Mexico, and just went hog wild on food down there. And then I moved to the UK, and I had one of my best friend over there had a shirt that said, "Meat is murder, tasty, tasty murder." And so like I was just surrounded by this like my entire life, but the whole time I was listening to propaganda, and I was like internalizing these ideas.
Yeah.
And so it was always in the back of my mind. And then when I moved to back to the States after grad school, I was like 26, I guess. And I got my own apartment, and I was like, all right, I'm doing this vegetarian thing. I'm going for it. And I would make it a few weeks at a time. And then I would like, backslide and like eat like a huge burger or a slab of ribs or something horrible. And then for a while, I got really into the whole like CSA meat thing as a way to like assuage my guilt of like eating burgers from McDonald's or whatever. I watched like tons of documentary films. I started reading tons of books about it. One that stands out to me is Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer.
Yeah.
Great book. I read Animal Liberation by Peter Singer. Great book. And finally my mind was in the right place, but I was like weak about it. You know what I mean? So in 2015, my spouse and I were talking about it a ton, and we were in Washington, D.C. for a work trip, and we were both just like, let's just do it. Let's commit to it together. And we did, and it happened, and we were both ready. And it's been 5.5 years now, and I was fully committed to going vegan. And I bought all the books I could find. I would come home from work and cook these like elaborate vegan lasagnas with like faux ricotta made out of tofu and everything, and like all kinds of stuff. And I would be the only one who would eat the food. And I'd have this massive like pan of food that would just get wasted. And I was the only one in my house who was eating the food. So it was massively dispiriting because I was so ready to go all in on being vegan because I was so into it. And I was the only one getting anything out of it. So then it became, do I cook 3 dinners for every single person in the house? And then we compromised, and we settled into like a straight vegetarian diet.
Yeah. So what about being a parent and, not eating meat? How has that kind of challenged you or forced you to evolve or kind of maneuver in any way?
My kid is basically a vegetarian. But it's because it's what she wants. Like she lives on, so every week I go to the grocery store, and her shopping list is raspberries, strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, peaches, Honeycrisp apples, bananas, and macaroni and cheese. And that's it. Like that's what she wants. Like, so she's basically a vegetarian. and like all the lunches that I send to school with her are vegetarian. And every now and then I think that she has a burger from McDonald's or a couple of chicken strips from like Wegmans or something here and there. But she's like 97% vegetarian, and we didn't even like put that on her at all.
Mm-hmm.
But it's tough, man, because I have friends here whose kids are vegetarian and they're very successful with it, and some people just fail miserably with raising their kids in a certain way. Because you go to another friend's house and something happens, and then all of a sudden, the kid experiences something new, and then boom, your whole world is like blown to smithereens.
Right. Yeah, that's an aspect of not eating meat that I've not had to navigate. Just, my wife and I, we don't eat meat, and not having to figure out what to do for a tiny picky person has made it, relatively easy.
Yeah. And being in it together is like really the only way to do it. I mean, if you live in a house with other people and you're not all doing it together, right, it's like a recipe for disaster for somebody in the family. So we've got a lot of ground to cover on this episode for humane meat. And it's going to get weird. It's going to get wild.
Yeah. So let's start with the guest, Greg. Who is our guest today?
I'm delighted by our guest on this episode. Our guest on this chat is Lindsay the Doctor McDougall from the band Frenzal Rhomb from Australia. I am so thrilled that Lindsay came on the show. I first saw Frenzal Rhomb live at the 1998 Warped Tour in St. Louis, Missouri, and I liked them a whole lot, but it wasn't until their album Forever Malcolm Young, which I believe came out in 2005 or 2006, that really solidified my love of Frenzal Rhomb and made me appreciate their work. In fact, if folks watch our Twitter, I'm going to put up a download code of Frenzal Rhomb's Best Of collection from Fat Records this week. So I got in touch with Lindsay, and he selected Humane Meat, the Flensing of Sandor Katz, as his song to discuss. Lindsay is a radio host in Australia. He is a guitarist for Frenzal Rhomb. He's an animal rights activist, and we are pumped to have him on the show. But Lindsay did something super special for this episode. Not only did he come on as a guest to chat about Propaganda, but he also recorded an acoustic version of Humane Meat. So we have a great chat coming up, but before we get into the interview with Lindsay, please enjoy his cover of Humane Meat, the Flensing of Sandor Katz.
I swear I did my best to ensure that his final moments were swift and free from fear. But consideration should be made of the fact that Sandor Katz was my first kill. So I trust the reader will understand that while his screams may well have seemed like conscious objections, they were in reality simply a request to honor his strength and speed. With gratitude and tenderness I singed every single hair from his body, gently placed his decapitated head in a stock pot, boiled off his flesh and made a spreadable head cheese. 'Cause I believe that one can only relate with another living creature by completely destroying it. I'm sure Sandor's friends and family appreciate this. A rationale so moronic it defies belief. Post-vegetarians, I must submit to you respectfully. Be careful what kind of world you wish for. Someday it may come knocking on your door. Hello, hi, excuse destroy your neck. I'm sure your friends and family will appreciate this.
Lindsay McDougall, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Thank you very much, Greg.
It is a delight to have you. So, Lindsay, looking through your bio, you have quite a broad range of jobs and interests over the years. I'm wondering if you can just spend a moment and introduce yourself to the audience just a little bit in case they don't know your work already.
Sure. The first thing I did with my life after leaving school, actually after 3 months of university, was drop out and join Frenzal Rhomb, the punk rock band that's on Fat Records over in America. And I've been doing that ever since 1996. And I started working in radio in about 2004. The lead singer of Frenzal Rhomb and me both started working in radio, and we work for Triple J, which is kind of like back at the time we worked for Triple J. It's like a national youth radio station. Lots of music. It's government funded, so there's no TV commercials. Lots of kind of alternative music or whatever you want to call it and stuff, and lots of talking and nonsense and all that kind of stuff. And I did that for 10 years. Most like the last 5 years just by myself, and on like a sort of an afternoon drive show. Took a few years off after that to get married and travel around and do some lovely things with my wife and play lots of music as well. And we're still making albums. And then started working for ABC Radio, which is, I don't know, it's kind of like NPR or something, but it's like national, but there's individual local radio stations. And I work at the ABC in Wollongong, ABC Illawarra in Wollongong, which is about an hour and a half south of Sydney, by the beach, in between the mountains and the beach. It's beautiful.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds like a great life. So the topic of conversation is why we're here today, music and playing music and being in bands. And I've been a fan of Frenzal Rhomb for years, and we're both here today because of our mutual love of the band Propaganda from Manitoba. I'm curious if you can tell me how you discovered Propaganda way back whenever you first found them.
Yeah, it would have been after I joined Frenzal Rhomb. I was thinking about this when we were chatting online, and when I joined Frenzal Rhomb, I didn't know too much about punk rock besides the obvious stuff, your Green Days, your NoFX's, and Offspring and all that stuff, which was kind of big in the mid-90s. And I remember we would have listened to, I think, Let's Talk More Rock, which I'm guessing was released around the mid-90s or something. Yeah. And so we would have been on tour. Our manager would have played it in the car. It probably would have been a cassette, maybe a CD, but it would have been on a Walkman that would have been plugged into the cassette holder of the tour van. Those little cassette things. Yeah, so it would have been that, because we just toured constantly from when I joined onwards. It was sort of when the band really sort of hit, and so we would have been listening to Let's Talk More Rock. We would have picked up How to Clean Everything after that, and it was the soundtrack. We toured pretty much constantly from 1996 through to the year 2000, I'd say, and we just listened to lots of music all the time. But that was one of the bands that we just constantly listened to and just fell in love with. I was trying to find a way to I don't know, I wasn't a very good guitarist, so I was trying to find ways to learn how to play guitar, and listening to Chris's guitar is certainly a good way to do that. So yeah, I just absolutely fell in love with them. Also, at the same time, when I joined the band, I wasn't vegetarian, and our singer told me to go vegetarian or I wasn't allowed in the band. So, because I sort of come from like a weird sort of suburban place where there wasn't much vegetarian sort of stuff. So anyway, Propaganda was a good introduction to that. I went vegan soon after that. And so, you join this band, you get exposed to all these new ways of doing things. You hear this other band that's like heaps better than your band and also has these great sort of ethics, and you get right into it. And so, yeah, that was pretty much how I first heard Propaganda. And then I was pretty lucky to see them pretty soon after that. They toured Australia on that tour, I would say. And I went on to the show. It's quite funny. Like, there's a funny thing, because when bands get big, obviously people listen to them who don't agree with everything that they say, or they don't listen to the lyrics. It's like in Australia, we have this massive band called Midnight Oil, who so many people love, giant Australian band, but a lot of them won't, sort of go along with every lyric, which is, give all the land back to the First Nations people, or stop mining for uranium, stop giving in everything to corporations. You got people, giant business, corporation CEOs singing karaoke Midnight Oil. So Propaganda was a similar thing when they went really big, which I guess when they first, they were on Fat Records. So mid-90s, every Fat Records kid's going to watch Propaganda. And I remember leaving a gig and had to walk back to the train station, and on the way saw like a sea of Propaganda t-shirts in at the McDonald's between the gig and the train station. And,
Yeah.
And this is me, like I've just joined Frenzal Rom and I'm just become a vegetarian and I'm just feeling all real self-righteous. I'm like, fuck that, man. It's quite funny. And on that tour, they also came down here to Wollongong, although I didn't live here at the time. And I went and saw them at the Wollongong Youth Centre. And I remember, must have been Todd. So it must have been after Todd had joined the band, because it was definitely him. And his bass strap had broken, but he wouldn't use a spare one from one of the other bands because it had leather on it.
Oh,
so,
wow.
When you get, you learn sort of pragmatism as you go along in life, and learn it's probably better not to hold the show up for half an hour while you try and make a strap out of non-animal materials if you're just going to use a strap for 20 minutes or whatever. But so that was all. And apparently the last show on that tour, they all played completely nude, but I wasn't at that show.
Oh, wow. Nice. Okay, so that would have been about 96. So Frenzal puts out Punch in the Face in 96 too, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Okay,
another big political anthem like Propaganda.
Yeah. So, I mean, like you said earlier, you guys continue to this day. Your most recent one is Hive His High Tea, which is amazing. I was listening to that yesterday on my run, and I was like, oh my God, this is so great. But so just as a quick personal aside, you mentioned earlier before we started recording that you did Warped Tour in 1998 in the U.S. And I was at the St. Louis, Missouri 1998 Warped Tour, and I saw Frenzal Rom on one of those on one of those stages that you were sharing with MXPX.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, just for my own curiosity, because I was there, do you have any special memories of that 98 Warped Tour in North America?
So many memories of the 98. So we traveled by club wagon while all the other bands were in buses and things. When we did the 99 Warped Tour, we borrowed one of the Descendants' tour trucks, which they had made out of a refrigerator truck. But on the 98 one, we were in a club wagon. Missouri, St. Louis. There was so many. Basically, this is what happened. We'd get to a show at 9 in the morning, get to the venue because you had to set up the merch tent. And as soon as the doors were open, you were selling merch. And the only way you ate was if you sold merch, because you weren't getting paid on the day from the venues, obviously. So we basically had to sell merch. We had to hustle like hell. So we get there, and we usually would get to the hotel the night before, get to the Motel 6 or whatever at 3 or 4 in the morning, sleep for a couple of hours, get up, go straight to the merch, set up the merch. Funnily enough, we were set up next to MXPX most of the time, which was quite funny. And I do remember being a horrible little kid and yelling at them, if you believe in God, then what you're doing is going to mean you're going to go to hell and all these sort of things. Because, they were drinking and carrying on like fools, like we all were. It was just a constant hustle all day. You didn't know when you were playing because they mix up the playing times every day to give every band a chance to sort of play later or whatever. And what else do we do on those? I mean, we just drank a lot and hung out and tried to. I think that was the tour when we beat Fat Mike in a pool game, and as a result, he signed us back to his label. He put out a 7-inch a couple of years before that, but then he sort of didn't do anything with us. And then Jason beat him in a pool game at Bottom of the Hill in San Francisco, and then we ended up putting out our next few albums, and still do it. But I think, how you can kind of invent history in your head. We definitely played that pool game. We definitely won, but I think maybe the deal had already been done, and we just fashioned it into this nice story.
Nice.
And we had the electric boogaloo at our merch stand. So we used to have shirts and CDs and stickers or whatever. We'd be throwing stickers at people. We had this loudspeaker. We'd be yelling at people in our big Australian accents to come and do whatever. And we'd be gambling and all this stuff, trying to make our merch stand the funnest place to be at, because we were these bunch of idiots that no one knew from Australia with these funny accents. So it was just one of those things. And then we would just, the Warped Tour would finish. We'd drink until we couldn't stand up anymore, get in a club wagon, drive for another 3 or 4 hours to the next city and do it all again. And right through, the middle of America. So St. Louis, Missouri. No, St. Louis.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that Obispo? Is that place?
So yeah, St. Louis is an interesting phrase because whenever I tell my Canadian friends that I'm originally from St. Louis, Missouri, they're like, "No, it's actually St. Louis. There's no St. Louis." So everybody outside of St. Louis, like who has like a French culture, like the further north you go, they're like, "You all are saying the entire name of the city wrong," but it's just south of Chicago.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah, I'm looking at it on the maps right now. Oh gosh, yeah. So we would have had some beautiful times around there, because yeah, we were hanging out with in Illinois. We were hanging out with bands like the Blue Meanies, and I don't know if we'd met Alkaline Trio by that stage, but yeah, like we just basically hung out with the people who drank the most. And a lot of Americans, you know, they either do or they don't. There's not a lot of, like, Australians all drink, but a lot of Americans either don't drink, or they'll drink once a month on the day off or whatever. You know, they were very serious because some people took their careers seriously. But you've got the Mark Twain National Forest just south of you too. That's beautiful.
Yeah. No, it's nice.
Anyway,
I've been there a bunch of times.
But yeah, and on some of those shows that we toured to Manitoba. We saw Propaganda in Manitoba. I think that was in the year 2001, maybe, on a NoFX tour, because Propaganda stopped touring for a bit in the middle of that. Because they just hated, obviously, you know, the world, and everything had to do with some evil corporation, so they didn't want to be involved in it or whatever. But they've toured back here a few times since, and it's always been, just so much fun. Especially now that I know what a guitar is. In like '96, I didn't really quite understand, and I couldn't really play. But now, like, listening, you know, I go and just watch, put myself right in front of, whichever guitarist I can get closest to, and just watch and just concentrate and just try not to drink too much.
Absolutely. Well, I'd imagine it's that way to this day. Like, if you were to go there now, you could still do that, and you could still learn something new on the guitar, because that's the great thing about the guitar is you're always learning. You know what I mean? There's always a new chord to discover. So I'd imagine that if you're right in front of the stage watching Chris or Sulin or Beav, that you could learn something new almost any time, right?
And you know what? A lot of people would think, you know, there's not a new chord to discover. That's silly. But there is, and it's when you break yourself out of your little genre blinkers of, punk rock, and everyone thinks, you know, 4 chords is all you need or whatever. But, you know, that's the great thing about Propaganda, that they completely reinvented themselves as a thrash band and like a technical metal band, and just play such excellent songs, but with really great technical bits and stuff in them, which is why it's so much fun to watch. Like, you can definitely thrash your way through a lot of the earlier Propaganda stuff with minimal kind of technique, but then, I just love nerding out. And I also love, I get frustrated, but I kind of love the fact that there's so much stuff I just cannot play, and it just makes you want to be better, because they're so good. Yeah.
Have you, so throughout your 25 years or so with Frenzal, have you like crossed paths socially with Propaganda at all?
No, they came to the Manitoba show we did with NoFX, and I remember, because they didn't play that. Sorry, they came to the show, but it was kind of like, and our manager brought them out to Australia a couple of times. But apart from, I went and saw them in Canberra, which is in our nation's capital. It's like about 3-hour drive from here, and I went to that show like in 2010 or whatever, and I ended up going back to the hotel room where they were just sitting up and talking and drinking cups of tea. I think Jord maybe was smoking a bong, if I'm allowed to. I'm gonna probably get him arrested now. Like that was, that's about it. I kind of, you know what? Sorry, I just remembered. That's awesome. We went to their cafe and record label in Manitoba, in the bloody city they're from, would have been in the 90s. I just pictured that now. We're up because their G7 Welcoming Committee Records was upstairs, and there was a vegan cafe downstairs, and I reckon I had bacon made out of seitan for the first time at that cafe. Man, that memory just came flooding back.
Awesome.
I
didn't even know there was a cafe.
Yeah, well, mate, this is once again my memories of it. And if we were on the Warped Tour, which I say we would have been, I don't know if it went through Manitoba, because we toured with Chicks Dig, this other Canadian band. We came right through Canada, from all the way out Halifax, Nova Scotia, Glace Bay, all the way through and back to Calgary. So maybe it was on that tour, which was in 1999. But anyway, a long time ago, and I ate a sandwich. So that's the extent of that story. So that was fun. Since then, because I work, I kind of have to like come into gigs and then race away to get back. I was doing a lot of breakfast radio, so I didn't get to stay late a lot of the times.
Awesome. Well, okay. So, whenever I reach out to people to do this show, I always ask guests to choose songs that stand out to them for whatever reason, to be featured on a specific episode because it's a song-by-song show. So when I reached out to you to come on this show, you mentioned that you wanted to chat about the song Humane meets the Flensing of Sandor Katz from 2009's Supporting Caste. And I'm curious if you can just we're going to get into like the song's lyrics and the performance in a little while, but I'm curious if you can tell me why you picked this song in general.
Well, it's a great song, and so that's one of the reasons. Adventures in Zoochosis was already taken because we were talking on Twitter, and I mentioned that I cry occasionally when I listen to that song. But it's another beautiful.
Tell me a little bit about Zoochosis though, real quick, just like if you have a little anecdote that you'd like to share.
It's just because of the story in the song. It's beautiful. It's a parent animal that's in a zoo or in a circus, and basically saying to his or her children, "I'm going to help you get free. You deserve better than this. But in doing this, I'm going to make sure I'm never free." And he's a man. That's right. It's these bars are all your old man knows. Like he can't escape, and it's just beautiful. And it's that that feeling of a dad giving up everything for his kids, literally, and then you realise that this is set inside the bars of where an animal's kept. Animals are kept against their will, and I had been drinking white wine on a Sunday afternoon, so that's probably why. But yeah, it's just a beautiful song, and there's a couple like that as well. There's a beautiful story of Francis as well, the pig that escaped on an earlier album, Potemkin City Limits, of course, not on the album, but on the song. Because Propaganda like doing that, where they throw a song, the album title, on a song that's not on that album. So anyway, so I love all of the different things that Propaganda sing about. There's you remember when they used to with from Today's Empires onwards, they had these giant booklets that would come along with the record, and you're like, what are you talking about? There's no internet back in when that came out, so you're just like going, what is this? What is all this stuff? It's like I'm lying in the back of the club wagon off my face with the new Propaganda record under my arm. I don't want to read annotations. I just want to, but I just want to read lyrics and understand them. But so to bring it back to Humane Meat, that combines two of my favorite things about Propaganda's like lyrics and song subjects, and that's a song to do with animal rights or the disconnect that humans have between humans and animals, and their really dark sense of humor that they have quite a lot as well in their songs. So that's what I love about it, and it just rocks in those cool ways that Propaganda kind of combine. Yeah, just metal and punk, and there's a bit of space in the song. Yeah, it's because it's a good fucking song.
Nice. I sort of see this song as like a short 3-movement tune in a way. Like, so part 1 to me starts with like, I swear I did my best to ensure. And then part 2 starts with a rationale so moronic it defies belief. And then part 3 is let me in.
It's the horror. Well, yeah, it is, and it is because they're a prog band. So there's always movements in their songs, but it is pretty simple. It's like A B, then it moves to C, and then I guess there's D, and then it moves back to your A B right at the end, a version of it as well. But it also, because it's telling a story, so they get to be a bit dramatic and theatrical in it, like and the music changes with each of those bits, and then when he's on the door, bashing on the door, that's when the music gets really messed up. It's great.
Yeah. I know you have a guitar there. Did you want to demonstrate something?
Of course, but I've got an acoustic guitar though, so it's probably not going to be. But no, this is the other cool thing, because you listen to Propaganda stuff and you're like, I'm never going to be able to play that. What are those notes? And I watched, I think it was before, because I know Chris does a Patreon where he shows off all of his guitar riffs and everything, tells stories. But this was, I think I just watched someone else play it, and it's got a capo on the 5th fret, and it's just so good. So it's essentially playing. It's simpler than most songs with the actual verse, and but then because he's got a capo on, he can do all those other cool tricks like. Played very badly, but because there's all these awesome things that he can do. And it just sounds like to do an open, well, it's like a C9 or C add 2 or whatever. But up on that, it sounds. But that's not metal. That's not punk rock. But they just make these things absolutely work. Yeah, I played it acoustically at an animal thing, like a animal liberation festival in Melbourne, and it definitely didn't go down that well because everyone, you imagine when people are playing animal liberation festivals, they're all like nice songs about how lovely animals are and all that stuff, and I'm just like, anyway, this song's about killing a meat eater. Eating.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it worked very well. Well, for me, it worked very well.
And this is a really interesting song because you have this band that is extremely anti, war and violence and all the things in the world, and is very pro animal rights. This has been well documented for many years, but this song is satirical in nature, and it's about the name that's used is Sandor Katz, who's the author of "The Revolution Will Not Be Microwaved." He's an openly gay Jewish AIDS survivor as well, which is really interesting. I'm curious.
Like they're not picking one of those standard jocks. They're not picking like Anthony Bourdain or Gordon Ramsay or someone that's like really into have gone for a particular. I'm sure that they're just showing that they're taking no prisoners. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm curious, what you thought about, because I know Frenzal has tons of satirical stuff as well, and there's tons of humor within the song. But I'm wondering if your thoughts on naming a particular person in this song as opposed to just making it more of a generalized response, because you could essentially mask the identity of the person, but they take it a step farther.
It's true, and I think that's just playing into to take it the other way. You could just be vague about it, but you're not actually doing this. And also, they're not saying everyone listening to this go out and boil the flesh off Sandor Katz. But I think they're making a point that someone like that he's written about humane meat. That's his whole thing. Is that if you you offer up thanks for the beast that you're killing, and you make sure that you use all of it and all that kind of thing, then you're honoring it and you're doing the right thing. And they're saying, well, so what they're saying is essentially what Sandor Katz is saying, but they're taking the word cow or buffalo or pig or whatever Sandor says and putting his name into it. Mm-hmm. So it's just they're just pointing the mirror straight back at him and showing the cognitive dissonance and that disconnect that people have behind that sort of thing, because as they're saying, if he can do that to an animal and honor it, and that's in his mind the perfect way to, and the correct way to, the humane way to eat an animal, then surely he's got no problem, and his friends and family will appreciate it, that if they do exactly the same thing to him. And it's a pretty strong argument. So to use his name, it means that they can make that argument much more, I think, much more solidly. And I think it also goes to broader than just him. This kind of an allegory of people who use humane ideas as a selling point, and this kind of comes to my mind. It also brings up stuff like your wellness industry, because veganism's been so tied up with wellness at the moment, and it has been for the last few years as veganism's got popular and wellness has got popular and raw foods and all this. I was like, animals don't care if you cook the food you're eating as long as you're not eating them. Wellness doesn't matter to animals unless it's them that's well, not you, So these kind of celebrity food people that use a type of ethical justification, whether it's vegans people who are celebrity vegans who make money out of veganism, or using a different ethical argument like Sandor Katz, when really all of it is it's kind of based around well, it's hypocrisy. It's just basically they're trying to make money. That's how so I just that hypocrisy, if and it's boiling it down, pun intended, to the most obvious thing. Well, if you reckon this is okay to do this, well, then we're going to do it to you. And then put some lovely soaring sounds at the start of it.
Yeah. The sound effects in the beginning. Oh my gosh, so funny.
Yeah. They're loud. They're so loud.
Oh, I know. And it's really disturbing too, whenever you consider like the topic of the song, and then you go back, like the first time you hear the song and you're like, what in the world? And then you hear the song and then you realize that it's essentially like bones being sawed.
I got to say, I didn't know what the word flensing meant. I didn't know who Sandor Katz was when I was hearing it, and I heard it, and I was just thinking, oh, this is nice, where you're apologizing for something or whatever, and then, it's very well written, and I know Chris considers himself quite good at that sort of stuff, and and it works. Some of his songs make me cry, so yeah, it's dark and good.
Do you have any particular favorite lines within the song, like lyrics that like either, like you mentioned Flensing, like you learned something, but like you have any particular song, like lyrics in the song that are just like really hit it for you?
Well, I look up, these days, I haven't actually checked Genius. I'm sure it's got all the annotations, but you look at stuff and think where they say, because I believe that no one ever can relate, that one can never relate with another living being without completely destroying it. So I'm guessing that that's a version of what Sandor Katz has said, and it's kind of that. It just points out the hypocrisy of what they said. Obviously Sandor Katz has said he knows how this animal feels. He feels its strength and speed. That's been honored. I've caught it. I've killed this animal. We are one. We are I've dominated this animal, but it's like there's some kind of equal footing, even though you're a human with a gun. Yeah. Anyway, that's I like those kind of ideas. So I think, because there's really not that many lyrics either. That's the other thing. It's
so
kind
short.
Of quite really short sort of thing. So it's just a really neat story, and I feel like if you went back through it all and then went back through the writings of Sandor Katz up until the second act, where he talks about the defying belief and all that kind of stuff, he's probably just reappropriating Sandor Katz's words as well, and then he pulls out and looks to the camera and says, "A rationale, so moronic, it defies belief." So yeah, it's
I like
really
that.
To answer your question. Yeah.
I like that reframing almost as like a film where it's like, a narration, and then Chris looks at the camera and he's like, "A rationale so moronic it defies belief." So it's like him watching it.
Yeah, like everyone's listening to him going, "Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Yeah, I guess you should just kill this guy." And then he's going, "Seriously? You believe what I'm saying? Didn't you see how stupid that was? If he's saying that and I'm saying you should kill him, think about it. No one should die." So it comes back to that idea of them being anti-violence and saying, no, this is stupid. This is ridiculous. Of course we shouldn't be singeing every single hair from his body and placing his decapitated head in a stock pot, although that's pretty beautiful. That is a beautifully evocative line, as it boiled off his flesh and made a spreadable head cheese. Like, this guy, even though he hasn't eaten animals for a very long time, since he was brought up by his military father, I'm pretty sure Chris Hanna knows his way around a stock pot.
I bet. Absolutely. Well, Lindsay, is there anything else that you'd like to say about this song? There's also that ripping guitar solo that kind of brings us to a close.
Isn't it? And that's kind of like, that's the final thing. That's kind of the, you think of the brutality of what they're suggesting, and he's there. That's them murdering a guy and doing a rag guitar solo on his grave, and just because they can. And there's so much of that, because this album, and I checked, because this album is all recorded at Bill Stevenson's studio in Fort Collins, which is where we record as well. So I can picture Chris and the Beeve recording this and having Jason Livermore, who records the guitars, slapping their fingers metaphorically until they got every single note right. That's what I meant to say, because the best thing about recording at the blasting room is that they don't let you get away with anything. So you may have written a part that goes, and it sounds great, but Livermore's going to say, stop. And every note he wants to know, like, you can't fudge anything. He wants to know exactly what you're doing, and you've got to do it on purpose. So that's why everything's so absolutely, like not like militant, but just exactly right. There's no wasted notes. There's no and so that's And so with the solo as well, I can just picture him in the studio, and it's a great studio too, and just he would have just been hammering him to get that solo right, whether it was, I'm sure it was Chris or the B, but it's that stuff's so right. And the weird little bit between the verse and the chorusy bit where it kind of misses a note, like it sort of that bit there just comes in early, and that's one of George's bloody great skills as well, playing the drums and that. Yeah, that's good. It's they're so, watching them play live, it's so not like, it's just so military. It's just great. It's just really good.
Yeah.
But there's one other thing I do want to say, and that's back to that Midnight Oil idea of so many Propaganda fans wouldn't be vegan. They wouldn't be vegetarian. There's probably, Republican voters. There's probably all that claim. There's like, but it's kind of that, like my brothers, I got two younger brothers who play in a band, and they also, I've joined them on stage, and we've done entire Propaganda albums. We've done obviously the first two easy albums, none of the hard albums, but we've played, Let's Talk More Rock or the first one, like from start to finish on like cover nights, on like harbour cruises and stuff. And it's great. And my brothers sing these songs, and I'm just looking at them going, dude, you just ate a chicken schnitzel. You're just thinking like, but I think that's the beautiful, like futility of being a great band with a really serious message. You're going to have so many people going, fuck yeah, I believe no one can really relate with, not a living creature, that bee destroying it. Or fuck, sorry, me Palmer's ready, going to go get it. And so it's a Palmer is it's a short for it's a great Australian pub meal. But so I love that is, I love that they become, they're now a proper constant touring band. They tour all the time, they play, they record all the time, and they've kind of just given into the fact that people who don't get in, that people are going to get into them regardless of their beliefs. Sorry, I just keep banging. I just think it's quite an interesting point that they've kind of just given into that, and that's just the way it is.
But it also acknowledges that Propaganda, sort of sees their listeners as like never being like a lost cause. People can change. It's a very hopeful thing as well, what you're saying.
That's nice. And that pragmatism that I may not have seen in 1996 when they held the show up for 35 minutes to wait for a bass strap that didn't have leather on it. That they've just realized, well, what's more important is you rock first, then you change people's minds later.
Yep. Nice.
Yes.
Fantastic.
So that's, once again, Let's Talk More Rock. I think they did actually suggest that.
Awesome. Hey, Lindsay, do you have any like links or places that you would like for listeners to check out, any projects that you would like to promote or anything like that?
Oh, God.
Besides that amazing new Frenzal record.
Yeah, you should go pick up the Frenzal record, and there's some pretty fun things up on. If you go to the not the ABC, that's my other job, to the Frenzal Rom Facebook page. There's some cool, because we haven't been playing gigs and stuff. Jason's done a few. Our singer's done a few like live streams, acoustic, which are kind of fun. And Jason plays in another band called Neptune Power Federation. His wife is the singer, and they are the fucking best. They are just awesome psychedelic doom, great stuff.
Oh, amazing. Well, dude, and I was thinking yesterday when I was listening to the new Frenzal record, I heard the song Pigworm comes on, and I'm like,
yes.
And I'm like, this could be a Propaganda song. Like, this could be Todd, like this song. You know what I mean? It could be one of those banging.
A Todd song. It's definitely a Todd song, yeah.
Absolutely. And so, like, I see these, like, influences, like, doing this show and talking to people who like Propaganda. I see these influences come through in music all the time.
I steal lots of stuff from Propaganda for sure, and it's that thing of like putting extra notes in, like not just doing chords, but putting extra things in between, like that sort of thing on an acoustic guitar sounds like a folk band, but you put that on a mad electric guitar and it sounds like Propaganda. And although that song Pigworm is actually. He had a seizure. We thought he had a tumor. He passed the hell out. He went to hospital, and it was discovered that he had a tapeworm from a pig living in his brain, that had burrowed into his brain for 3 years, lived there fine, and then died and started rotting. It had a husk around it, and then when it died, it started rotting. And so when he died, that's when Jason started having these seizures. And the best thing was I was at work at the time, and Jason called me after he'd been in hospital for a week, and he said, first thing is, I'm okay. It's all good. Second, you are not going to fucking believe this story.
Unbelievable.
He'd picked it up by buying like a dirty burrito somewhere in South America that some poor guy hadn't washed his hands properly before making it. But anyway, that's for a different podcast.
Absolutely. Holy smokes. That's wild. Oh my God. Okay. Well, Lindsay, I know it's getting super late at night over there for you in Australia. You're 14 hours ahead of me, so I appreciate you taking some time on your evening with me, and to geek out about propaganda and humane meat from Supporting Caste, and telling me some great stories about touring the U.S. back in the day. I'm really grateful for your time and your participation in this project. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Greg, and have a lovely morning in the past.
Unconscious objections, they weren't reality. Simply a request to honor his strength and speed. With gratitude and tenderness, I seared every single hair from his body. Gently placed his decapitated head in a stock pot, pulled off his flesh and made a spreadable head cheese. Cause I believe that one can only relate with another living creature by completely destroying it. I'm sure Santa's friends and family would appreciate this.
So Keith, that was our chat with Lindsay McDougall from Frenzal Rhomb. What did you think of that cover that he did?
You know, I've been watching the 2 minutes to late night videos that do, really big covers and those
They're
really
so
cool
great.
productions. And I think there are a couple really effective ways to make a cover. You either just try to nail it and sound like the band, but just updated.
Like their Rush one that they did.
Right. Yeah, like exactly. That is the best example. Or you kind of do put an interesting twist on it while still making the song recognizable. And I think that is the best way to describe this. It was recognizable, but he kind of really still made it his own without it being too different. And it's just unique and melodic and slightly off kilter. And it kind of seemed to get weirder as I was listening, but in a way that I totally really liked.
I loved the email that Lindsay sent me with the song. He said, yeah, the vocals are a little weird, but hey, that's the McDougall charm for you. And I was cracking up because as soon as I listened to it, I was like, that is just the perfect thing that he ever could have said in that email. Thanks again to Lindsay from Frenzal Rhomb for coming on the show. I loved having a chat, and the song is fantastic. I would highly recommend that everybody who's listening, listen to that again, because I've listened to that cover 6 or 7 times now to fully appreciate everything about it, because the character behind it is just so unique, and the feel for it is so unique. And I loved Lindsay's oh, hello, let me in. I loved it. It was just wonderful. So thank you, Lindsay, so much for taking the time to do that for us. But Keith, I think we should start with the music on this tune first, if that's okay with you tonight.
Yeah, let's do it.
So to me, this one almost seems like a 3-act play, right? So the structure of this song from the beginning, where the bread is being sliced, over the goofy screaming, to about 1:30, where it ends with, I'm sure Sandor's friends and family can appreciate this. So that to me seems like part 1. Then from the to the free from fear part seems like part 2. And then the guitar solo to the end seems like part 3. So I feel like we have like a 3-act play here almost for this tune. What do you think?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I didn't really think about it in those sections, but I can hear that now. As you were describing it. And, for me, what stands out in the intro of the music after the audio is there's just this delicate and soothing aspect to that opening chord progression. It seems to create a really unique texture right away. And I saw an article on Sputnik Music where Chris says the band would be taking a leaf out of the Less Talk More Rock table rather than really following what they did on Potemkin. And I think that's kind of audible here. And I don't know if I noticed that before. It seems to be way more melodic and not as maybe complex or a little bit as thrashy as some things on Potemkin.
For sure, yeah. Like, to me, this tune fits within the sound that Propaganda leans into melodically on songs like Name and Address Withheld, Speculative Fiction, Copped Us Out of Frame, Failed Imagineer. Like, this song sounds nothing like anything on Failed States.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that? Like, how there is not a single song that fits within this stylistic Propaganda. Like, you know, they have songs that are like this. Elsewhere in their catalog. Resisting Tyrannical Government, obviously, it stands out like that. But there's not a single bouncy melodic song like this on Failed States at all.
Yeah, and what else stands out is the way I think, like, right away certain syllables are accentuated by the music, and I don't think it's necessarily predictable or overused. But every time I listen to it in the opening with, you know, just I swear I did my best to ensure that, like, I'm always moving my hands back and forth.
Oh, nice.
Like a conductor. I don't know why, but it's something that I always do. And it just has like this swaying motion in my head. And, you know, and it switches. And the guitars are layered. And maybe there's like an unorthodox chord here and there that creates a little bit like of an eerie or dissonant feeling. And, you know, there's the pick chords and sometimes that are thrown in at the end of some measures. So you have like a little bit of a feel from a variety of different eras, but it still really sounds unique.
Yeah, definitely. I love how Chris plays this with a capo on the 6th fret and then tune down a half step. It lends it to a different sound that, you know, that's just the beauty of the capo as that tool there. You know what I mean? It just gives you that unique sound that you may not have in other songs. But the opening riff, it opens and it's just got that ringing, that wow, swear I did my best to ensure that, wow. You know, it's just got that open strum and it's so calm. And then it's got those fluttery notes. I love that. I love the simplicity of that riff strum as it starts. And then to me, like that's just so unique where he just hits it open and then he hits these little and it's just so pretty. And it reminds me so much of like the style when we were talking about Resisting Tyrannical Government a few months ago. And then this song also has that, I'm bouncing forward a little bit, but that guitar solo on Humane Meat is officially, I think, my second favorite Propaganda guitar solo out of all the songs, after the predictable choice of Purina Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And I was so pumped when this record came out because like I felt like Potemkin was missing a huge outlandish guitar solo, and this song kind of scratched that itch of what I felt like Potemkin didn't have.
Yeah, the guitars really go on a journey here from the melodic and delicate intro later on to that very emotional but singable solo. And in between, there's also that really, again, kind of uneasy feeling. There's like a riff under, you know, the Let Me In.
I just want to fully relate.
Yeah, like the music kind of seems to reflect, you know, see what might happen if you're on the receiving end of this humane treatment. Like the cymbals fall away. George is just smashing the toms. And then there's that monster riff that could be on like a Sacrifice or a Creator album.
Yeah.
And then even with that, the capo being on the 6th fret, you know, it still sounds super heavy and metallic. And then they do this crazy thing. And I guess I didn't even notice it, you know, as many times as I listened to this album until I just watched a live video, where they switch back and forth between that super thrashy riff and then that bright punk melody, you know, right before the solo, when Chris sings, I swear I'll do my best to ensure it. When he sings that again, like it just like it kind of changes on a dime back and forth. And, you know, I know it, but not until I really saw it was like, it's like two different songs smashed together there.
Ooh, I love that. That reminds me of that strategy that Propaganda uses, like what Ben Murray from Heart Sounds told us ages ago about how they have like a part in the beginning of the song, and then like later on in the song they'll revisit that part for like 5 seconds, and then they go back into what they're doing. So that's like that Propaganda, like that signature move that they do, where they just throw in stuff from earlier in the song for like 2 seconds, and then they go right back into it and they hit you hard again. But that riff, man, that I just want to fully relate that. That is one of the most memorable and singable riffs in the entire Propaganda catalog. I have air guitared to that riff a million times at this point. Like, I'll be out on a run and I'll just be like the psycho guy running down the sidewalk with my headphones on, and I'll be like full on air guitar, but it's always that part. I just love it. And I can't even like whenever I sing it just now, I have to sing the whole part. You know what I mean? I can't just like do it once. I have to do the whole part where it goes through that second half of it. But it's just such a memorable riff for me. And the music on this song is just so on point. I absolutely love it.
Yeah. And I think too, with the left hand on the guitar so high up, Todd really levels out this composition. You know, at first I think his bass is in sync more with Jord, and then he somewhat switches and accompanies the guitars a little bit more. I think stabilizing and equalizing the song in a way that, you know, normally is just like, it's just so sharp and trebly that he balances it out quite a bit. And yeah, that solo, you know, I Want Solas You Can Sing To. Not really the high register sort of chaotic dive bomb whammy bar 80s thrash solos. Like, this is one that is, like you said, definitely memorable. And you know, I mentioned a YouTuber named Last Note who covers Propaganda songs. He did all of Victory Lap, but there's someone else I've been watching for a couple years named the Norwegian Oslo, and he has a ton of great Propaganda covers. And watching him shred through this, like I said, I picked up the different eras of the band. You know, there's like the melodic backbone, there's the layered picked melodies on like today's Empires. There's these complex connected riffs that evolve throughout the song, like in Potemkin, and just like a touch of the metal that the band is going to be taking on, you know, definitely with Supporting Caste, but I think even way more with Failed States.
I just checked while you said that, and the Norwegian Oslo is the playthrough video that I watched earlier today as well.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. He did a great job.
Yeah, he has a ton of good stuff.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, we've got so much to talk about with regards to the lyrics of this song. So I'm wondering if you think we should dive into the topic at hand.
Yeah. And first I wanted to acknowledge, before I kind of shared my thoughts, that, you know, there are so many topics to discuss when we look at animal rights and meat-free diets and veganism and vegetarianism. You know, everything from the nightmare-inducing conditions of factory farming under industrial capitalism. There's the environmental impacts of meat-centric diets. There's the manufactured culture that equates masculinity with meat, which I still have, like, every time I mention to anybody living in the Midwest, you get that kind of shudder where people literally say, ew. It happens.
How do you get enough protein?
Yeah. A student told me ew last week when I said I don't eat meat. You know, the human impacts, like 90% of COVID cases at meat factories are employees who are not white.
Yeah.
And the overall reality that meat packing work has become less safe, like our friend Chris Deutsch has written about. So I'm really going to try to focus my thoughts here to be a pretty narrow point, the crux of the song, just the ethical arguments around it. So there's so much to talk about, but I really want to try to focus there.
Yeah. And, you know, as we go through the other songs that are about meat in the Propaganda catalog, you know, like Lower Order or Purina Hall of Fame, or, Descartes, Nailing Descartes, there's so much that we can talk about, that we will get into. in the coming months. So this is going to be our first crack, I think, at a meat song, which, yeah, it's really invigorating here. So this song, something that blows me away constantly about this band is as they've gone later into their career, the amount of words that appear in songs is so sparse. This song has 189 words. And I am constantly shocked at how much this band is able to cram in with hardly any words whatsoever.
Right.
But before we get into this, I think that it's super important to talk about the person who is listed in the song, Sandor Katz. So do you know anything about Katz at all?
I don't know anything.
Okay, well, I do. I know some, and I'm hopefully going to, speak as clearly as I can about who this person is on this episode, because this is a really interesting choice, I think, for Propaganda to make as far as who is going to be like the subject of this particular tune.
Right.
So this is a satirical song about Sandor Katz, essentially being humanely killed, essentially being described using his own words in his own book. But Katz writes about the humane killing of animals, and Propaganda flips his own words on him and turns him into the subject of the song. So it's satirical in nature, but it's vivid. And so in general, Katz is a noted fermentation enthusiast. He is a food writer. He is a DIY food activist. He's the author of a whole bunch of books, but notably for this conversation, he's the author of a book called The Revolution Will Not Be Microwaved. Something additionally that I found interesting about Katz's personal life is that he is an openly gay Jewish AIDS survivor, as I noted in my chat with Lindsay from Frenzal Rom. And Katz is also part of a group called the Radical Fairies, who are, according to my highly academic research online, a loosely affiliated worldwide network and countercultural movement seeking to redefine queer consciousness through secular spirituality. So sometimes deemed a form of like modern paganism, the movement Radical Fairies also adopts elements from anarchism and environmentalism. They reject hetero-imitation, and the Radical Fairy movement began during the 1970s sexual revolution among gay men in the U.S. So the movement has expanded in tandem with larger gay rights, challenging commercialization and patriarchal aspects of modern LGBTQ plus life while celebrating, eclectic constructs and rituals. So the fairies are like a super independent, anti-establishment and community-focused group. So in general, on the surface, Katz is like my kind of folks. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He seems more like more in common than more differences.
Exactly. So on to the topic of sort of like where this song comes from. The book description for The Revolution Will Not Be Microwaved reads as follows. Food in America is cheap and abundant, and also often bland, devoid of nutritional value, and produced without regard for anything beyond the corporate profit margin. As consumers, we opt for convenience, but the trade-off is that we know almost nothing about how our food is grown, where it comes from, or whether it's good for us. If we are what we eat, then our bodies and souls are largely at the mercy of agribusiness, commodity traders, and advertising executives thousands of miles from our homes and a world away from our real needs. So the revolution will not be microwaved takes on big food by profiling grassroots activists who challenge the way we think about food, from community-supported local farmers to raw milk producers forced to fly under the radar of big government. This book shows how ordinary people can find their way out of the corporate food maze and take direct responsibility for their own health and nutrition. Katz challenges the corporate food industry and attempts to reframe the way we think about food. He suggests how traditional cultural practices of sustainable agriculture might subvert the corporate farm system. What did you think about that?
I mean, I was snapping along to most of it. Yeah. I mean, I was Jay-Z GIF nodding along to I'd say 80%. I'm definitely on. I agree. Yeah.
Okay. So Humane Meat, The Flensing of Sandor Katz, the song is a take on a chapter from The Revolution Will Not Be Microwaved. So on paper, this guy, Sandor Katz, sounds like exactly the kind of person Propaganda would totally be down with. You know what I mean?
For sure. Yeah.
And in fact, I know some people who personally know Sandor Katz, and they call him Sandy in casual conversation. And they are absolutely horrified by the existence of this song and the use of Sandor Katz as the subject in this song. And I've seen multiple comments online from DIY foodies who say Katz and Propaganda are essentially ideologically aligned in everything except for the fact that Katz is a meat eater and will personally kill animals. But he also dresses it up as the "I love you by killing you" sort of language. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's a little bit about the book and Katz as a person. And if anybody's interested, Katz has the entirety of his intro chapter of The Revolution Will Not Be Microwaved posted for free on his website. And I mean, it's interesting stuff, you know, and I think that it makes a lot of sense that this book came into Chris Hanna's possession at one point, because I feel like somebody gave him the book and said, "Oh man, you got to read this guy. He's like so cool and stuff." You know what I mean?
Because there's so much overlap, and because maybe he was able to mainstream some ideas to challenge, you know, what we collectively practice or think about food, especially you know, agribusiness, as he said. So yeah, there's a lot of overlap there, but again, being the radicals or the extremists in an issue that they're not willing to compromise on, it's also like not a surprise that they're going to write kind of a jokey song about eating the guy.
Yeah. And so I said all of that really nice sounding stuff because now I want to totally gross everybody out by talking a lot about Katz's meat chapter. So now I'm going to totally so I started with all that positive sounding stuff, right? To kind of give you the overview that Katz is like in general of our world structure, not like the enemy. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Right.
He's a single person who is a really interesting human being doing a lot of really interesting stuff and writing some books that people really love, and people who I personally know who personally know him love him and think that he's absolutely fantastic and a wonderful person. So setting the stage for all of that with Katz as a person, I read Katz's chapter on meat, the whole thing. I got the book and I read the chapter in which he openly declares his half-hearted flirtation with vegetarianism and veganism. He's gone on a couple of forays into both. But he says that whenever he went vegan, he found himself dreaming about eggs in the middle of the night in his dreams until he realized he simply cannot be without meat and eggs. And I would imagine that that's something that almost that so many ordinary people would say as a way to kind of be like, well, I tried, but I just can't do it. You know what I mean?
Right. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So a line that I found to be funny is that he said, "Animal rights activists may find the term humane meat to be an oxymoron," which I'm sure that Chris Hanna got a big chuckle out of in like a sort of like a get a load of this guy kind of way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then Katz goes on to describe the horrendous conditions in which animals are raised. from male chicks being thrown into garbage bags to suffocate, to avian flu, to pandemics, to the 75,000 to 90,000 chickens that are killed per night in Tyson factories, to veal production. Like, all the horror of the factory farming meat system is in Katz's chapter. Like, all of the insanely terrible, disgusting, disgraceful things that we do to animals every single day in this world are fully on display in this chapter. And Katz seems completely outraged by all of these conditions, and he acknowledges all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of so he was disgusted by it, like anybody would be if you look at it openly and honestly. And then he tried vegetarianism and veganism, and lo and behold, was dreaming about eggs in the middle of the night. You know what I mean? So he's not hiding from it, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But later in the chapter, he says, like, more power to them regarding people who transition to be lifelong vegetarians. And he openly states he finds vegetarians and vegans an oppressed minority who carnivores project their insecurities on. So that was a really intriguing line.
Yeah.
He says, I fully acknowledge that vegetarians and vegans are oppressed because people who don't do what they do find them to be, threatening to their way of life. So picture like somebody who's like a big, huge meat eater, and like they associate a huge amount of their identity to it. If somebody shows up and says, oh, I'm a vegetarian, and they're like, oh, come on, man. You know what I mean? Like they project their insecurities onto the vegetarian instead of being like, oh, that's cool, man. I don't do that, but that's fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't feel oppressed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get annoyed when people ask me, they go through the checklist of everything I can eat and don't eat, but I don't feel oppressed.
I'm wondering if this was like a writing strategy that Katz used in order to compensate for the fact that he's about to get into some of the bloodiest and most disgusting writing I've ever read in my entire life.
Yeah.
So anyway, I learned like a ton by reading this Katz chapter. I found out that Pythagoras was a vegetarian, for example. I learned about an author named Carol J. Adams, who has written some very important books called The Sexual Politics of Meat, and another book called The Pornography of Meat, both of which he cites thoroughly in the book. So that's a little bit about Katz and his chapter, and the way that he frames the book is he's like openly acknowledging the horrors that occur. But then he goes on to argue for a more humane system,
right?
Where animals don't live in terror and things like that, which I think is something that we all like agree should happen. If an animal exists, it shouldn't live in a state of constant terror.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like picture your cat living in your house. You don't want your cat to live in a state of terror all the time. You know what I mean? So to me, that sounds obvious.
Just looking up the word humane, right? Merriam-Webster defines humane as marked by compassion, sympathy, or consideration for humans or animals. And then I thought it was interesting that they used it in like two ways. They said humane prison guards, and then a more humane way of treating farm animals. So that weird metaphor there that you can extrapolate out of that if you want to, having animals and prison guards side by side when talking about something being humane, kind of says something. But, I didn't read anything from him. And in preparing for this episode, I hadn't read before Peter Singer's Animal Liberation. But, reading that the last couple of weeks has been a major kick in the pants for me. And right away, like just this all reminds me of Singer's argument in which he says equal consideration of interest, that while animals might not be able to, reason or create or make the same things that humans can, art and technology truck nuts and infomercials.
Mhm.
You know, they have the capacity to suffer.
Yeah.
Right? They have
Yeah.
the capacity to suffer.
Yeah.
And far too many people see the capacity to suffer and the sanctity of life only in tandem with Homo sapiens. So
Yeah.
if I had to pick someone who was going to be eating, you know, like participating in the factory farm industry with no insight and no thought and no critical inspection of it, versus someone who's going to like, well, I'm going to be an omnivore, but I'm going to try to make the system a little better. If I got to pick between those, you know, I kind of agree with a lot of things that he has to say. Again, someone who still has major flaws, you know, and I don't like things about my own diet, but
Yeah.
you know, I'm selfish or stubborn or just unwilling to give up things that I know would also limit suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So that's a lot of background. Let's get into the lyrics. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the opening line, I swear I did my best to ensure that his final moments were swift and free from fear. So I read the chapter and I almost think that Katz is like a partial target of this song because, yes, he wrote the book, which he did not have to do. But a lot of the examples gleaned in this particular line are from an interview that Katz did with another woman named Shauna, who talks about taking responsibility for her meat eating by raising and killing her own animals, which is what you were just sort of talking about. Like, do you want the head honcho of like Tyson, or do you want the person who like does it on their own on the side? So Shauna said the words "free from fear" in the book. So when Chris wrote the lyrics, his final moments were swift and free from fear. I feel like almost the song should have been called The Flensing of Sandor and Shauna, because Shauna is the one who said free from fear, which is a direct quote from her in the book.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Like, I spent a lot of time with this book. Like, I went all out on this. Okay.
Yeah. And those lyrics are really vivid and sarcastic and really make you think. And I think my biggest takeaway that I hope to convey throughout this chat is that it still had me thinking then, and it has me thinking now, and just to hopefully do a little bit better than I did the day before, which sounds like a cop out. I know that, but you know, there's just so many complex ins and outs with food that, you know, I know I won't convince people by just spouting off a litany of, you know, terrible things in, you know, factory farms and in, you know, slaughterhouses. So maybe if anything, you hear that I struggle with this too, you know, that will open some people up to maybe trying something that they hadn't before.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the book, Katz talks a lot about how he just likes meat, right? He says it like at the very beginning, I like meat. And so we go into the next line, consideration should be made for the fact that Sandor Katz was my first kill. So I was wondering about this line because obviously it's talking about how whenever we kill something, it's not as simple as just like putting a bolt gun to the head. Like, humans are so flawed that no matter what we do, we will make unpredictable mistakes. So I was thinking about this line and I was like, oh my gosh, that's so weird. So I guess Chris is realizing like, oh, if you were going to kill somebody, you're going to, you know, screw it up the first time, right? Just like if you were going to like go out and try to kill a pig, you would mess it up the first time and it would be just disgusting and gross. And I was horrified to find that that's exactly what the example in the book is. In the book, wow. Sandor recounts the first time he and his buddy Todd killed something in Cameroon in Africa, and it is a stomach-turning read. At one point, he writes about ripping a chicken's head clean off. Then he writes about how killing has a learning curve, and I kind of almost wanted to puke. Then the book goes on to write about a group unsuccessfully killing a pig with an air gun. So a guy wrestles the pig to the ground and slashes its throat twice before the pig finally dies. And this dude who wrestled it to the ground and was stabbing it in the neck was like covered in blood. And so in that spirit, I'm going to read a murder scene from Sandor Katz's book about exactly that. So this is about a chicken named Horace. And this is from the book. We bought our bird and named him Horace. We kept Horace as a pet for a day or two before slaughtering him. We flipped a coin to see who would do the deed, and it fell upon Todd. Todd had watched people kill chickens by jerking their necks to snap the spine. It looked so straightforward when he watched women doing it who had done it that way their whole lives. But he quickly learned that the technique was not so easy. Todd injured Horace but did not kill him. Horace was bleeding and squawking, trying desperately to escape. Here our memories diverge. Todd recalls that he grabbed Horace's neck and, fueled by adrenaline, pulled his whole head off, spraying blood everywhere. I recall running into the house for a cleaver and Todd finally killing Horace with that, spraying blood everywhere. Which version really transpired? Isn't memory funny? At the hands of inexperienced incompetence, Horace died a prolonged and fearful death.
It kind of reminds me of that story. Have you ever heard about Mike, the headless chicken?
No.
It was in the 40s. A farmer went to slaughter one of his chickens, and he cut off its head, and it lived for 18 months afterwards. And he took it like on tours and drove around the country with it, feeding it with like an eyedropper. And yeah,
Ugh.
I don't know. Like, so for me, I said I didn't know who Sandor Katz was. I downloaded this album in Ukraine.
Yeah.
I had to go to my friend's school to download it.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the internet. So I saw the title, and this part gets to actually his name. So I really had no idea who it was, though. I could figure that it was somebody who must have backpedaled on eating meat. And like I said, I was eating meat at that time. But with everything said, I have to say that I still don't really see this song. I mean, obviously it's satire. I don't really see this as a legitimate threat. Maybe if I were friends with him, that would be different. I don't even really see it as, like some of the quasi mean-spirited songs that Propagandy has written. And I really think this could have been written about anyone. You mentioned other people already who might be vocal about meat abstention, as our pal Adam Sprinson refers to vegetarianism and veganism. But like what comes up to me and is the liner notes, right? The liner notes, the band says they're coming for Michael Pollan next, where it says, on this matter, I'm inclined to agree with the French, who gaze upon any personal dietary prohibition as bad manners. And it says Michael Pollan, author and next dinner guest on my list. And, I kind of get that in a way. I stayed with a family in Nicaragua a couple years ago, and they scooped vegetables out of chicken soup that they made for me. And I ate the vegetables because I couldn't really in good conscience tell them no. Or a family member who had, a family who had taken me into their home to share what little they had with me, when my flight there cost more than what they probably made in a month. Or being in Alabama, which seems about as inviting to vegetarians as Nicaragua. My cousin made me some noodles and shrimp, but he left the noodles. He just gave me some noodles. So in those rare instances, I'm not really vocal. I try to be as, flexible if I can.
Gentle.
While also being like true and to my own convictions, and also hoping I don't get sick. Because in Nicaragua, I got awful food poisoning from that soup.
Yikes.
And Michael Pollan, he argues for eating family-raised animals, kind of like what you've already mentioned. And he writes on his website, when obtained from small farms where these animals are treated well, fed an appropriate diet, and generally allowed to express their creaturely character, I think the benefits of eating such meat outweigh the cost. A truly sustainable agriculture will involve animals in order to complete the nutrient cycle, and those animals are going to be killed and eaten. And you already mentioned the book Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer, and he takes him to task about some of his ideas in Omnivore's Dilemma. And I read that book just after I stopped eating meat. And Foer argues, in all of this discourse on eating meat, which kind to eat, how to kill animals, he says, never, absolutely never emphasize that all the time one's choice is between cruelty and ecological destruction and ceasing to eat animals.
Yeah.
Right. And like, to me, that was just like, that was the kick in the pants I needed to continue to not, eating meat, to continue to refrain from eating meat. And he also shows that, like, even with, say, all of the humanely raised, whatever that means, chickens in the United States, there's enough to feed like Staten Island.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it, right? Like the environmental costs of doing that while having that same diet, those things are unsustainable.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just eat less meat.
Yeah. Well, and the amount of water that gets
Right.
used, to raise like a single pound of beef is astronomical. Like there's so much that goes into it. But I absolutely loved that Eating Animals book by Jonathan Safran Foer. I mean, was that sort of like an important text for you as well?
Yeah. I had already made my decision, and I was pretty much invested, and it's probably the only book really up until this point, other than Animal Liberation, which I'm reading now, that I read, and it was kind of all I needed.
Yeah.
And he ultimately does argue that, there's basically no ethical argument for eating meat. There's definitely no ethical argument for eating factory farm meat. But he argues in a way it's basically not ethical to be vegetarian. And he says the only real ethical argument is veganism.
Yeah.
And I agree with him.
Yeah.
I just haven't gotten there.
Yeah. Yeah. Same here. I'm like, whenever I think about the fact that Propaganda was doing these things in like the mid 90s, like I also think about folks like, AFI, the band AFI. They've been vegan forever. Toby from H2O has been like vegan straight edge forever. Russ from Good Riddance has been vegan straight edge like forever. And like I think about the fact that all these folks were on the road in vans touring around the country and around the world living as vegans. I can't even imagine how many times they all went to bed hungry on tours like all over the world because they couldn't find the right food at the right like gas station or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really admirable standing up for this kind of stuff. But I love that Safran Foer book. I think that everybody should read that book, Eating Animals. And I'm going to continue to gross everybody out in a little bit as well. I could read more passages about slaughtering that pig and wrestling it to the ground and winding up covered in one's own blood here in a little bit. But we'll wait till we get to the head cheese recipe, which I plan to read here in a little while.
All right.
So there's another line with gratitude and tenderness. This line, Katz uses this exact term in the book about the difference between the type of killing he's okay with and the type that he isn't okay with. So he's talking about how he is okay with like this small farm slaughter, but he's not okay with like a Tyson chicken factory.
Right.
And you still are killing it. You know what I mean? Like it's still killing. And let alone the fact that these are animals who wouldn't even exist if they weren't specifically brought into the world to be killed later. Do you know what I mean? Like there isn't even the need to raise this animal, to feed it, and to give it a quote unquote ethical life. Like it doesn't even need to become a sentient being in the first place. And here he's talking about giving it gratitude and tenderness as you essentially like slit its throat. You know what I mean? I'm
sure it's thankful.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. And like, we haven't even talked about the fact that opening bread slicing in this song with the screaming
Right.
is, the screaming of animals as well. As they're being killed, they tend to shriek and howl,
I think conversations about eating meat a lot of times end up about everything other than the ethical side of it. So here in the States, I always hear a rejoinder about protein, or maybe that we're made to eat meat and that animals are made to be eaten, kind of bumper sticker logic that shows people haven't really explored the topic too much. And they don't want to talk about the ethics, and especially the ethics of factory farming, which, as I said, I don't really think there is an ethical defense for, especially since we would be able to feed more people if we didn't raise the number of animals we raise to be eaten by people. And again, I say that as someone who still eats dairy products. I'm aware of my own flaws here.
Mm-hmm.
And
same here. Same.
What I think about this song and makes it so effective is the narrow scope, since it's just about the treatment, right? And it's just about the ethical arguments, and reading about that is overwhelming. That book, Eating Animals, is a hard read, but this hones in on the argument that, well, if an animal is treated well and killed with as little suffering as possible, okay, so then it's ethical. So that takes me back to Peter Singer in Animal Liberation, in which he talks about speciesism. He defines as a prejudice or attitude of bias in favor of the interests of a member of one's own species against those of members of others, or seeing one species, even not your own, being superior or better or more important than another. So the band is operating under this premise that, okay, all animals' lives should be treated with equal consideration, given that humans are animals. If you raise and kill them humanely, it must be ethical. So with gratitude and tenderness are perfectly witty. This is sarcastic and perfect word choices, because many of us, especially I think in the developed world, whatever that means, eat not with some virtue in mind, but we eat as an experience that is, I think, probably defined more by luxury and excess. And the song seems to embody, I think, conversations about the ethical treatment of animals, and they always get eclipsed by the conversations about the ethical treatment of animals. It's always about the rhetoric used or the language deployed. And I do think there are conversations to be had about those things. But again, if you look at comments about this song in the first place, the comments are about the song, right? And it's about the language and ideas in the song, but not about the content of the song.
Yeah.
Not about eating animals in the first place.
Yeah. And it's all human selfishness. You know what I mean? No one likes to have the mirror turned on them to say, you don't have to do this thing, which contributes to the subjugation of billions of sentient beings every single year. You don't have to. You do it because you want to do it. And by wanting to do it, you are just embracing your superiority over all of those billions of other sentient beings. To me, it's as simple as that. We are selfish, and we prioritize ourselves over the lives of others who we consider to be inferior. I mean, so that speciesism definition is something that Russ from Good Riddance talks about a ton on Instagram. Every single day he's putting it out there. And it makes tons of sense. We just do it because we're selfish and we want to keep doing it, and we don't want to have the mirror reflected on us. And that's what this song does so interestingly, is it does flip the mirror on somebody who is very well known, very well intentioned, but is still contributing to the the subjugation of other sentient beings.
You're going to talk about head cheese now, aren't you?
Oh my God, I sure am, buddy. Here we go. You ready for it? Head cheese time. So the line gently placed his decapitated head in a stock pot, boiled off his flesh, and made a spreadable head cheese. So, in the end of his chapter, Katz has a full-on recipe for head cheese. And the word that that head cheese is commonly called is souse, I believe. It's Souse. So here is the passage on head cheese from Sandor Katz's The Revolution Will Not Be Microwaved. Souse is made from the head of a pig. Another name for it is head cheese, though it is not cheese-like in any way, except that it joins together small bits of meat into a loaf shape. Head cheese sounds scary, and the idea of it makes many people squeamish, but the flavor of souse is super sweet and inviting. It reminds me of something between meatloaf and pate. I don't know where you'll find a pig's head, but this is a recipe for when you do. You can eat very well on what people trim away from a carcass as they prepare the choice cuts. So here's the method. Boil the whole head. The other books went on about what a delicate flavor and texture the brain has, so I did the work of removing the brain, which involved sawing through the skull. My friend walked into the kitchen as I was sawing a head in half. "You're always doing something controversial," he announced, shaking his head. Indeed, the fact that I was doing this project at all drove them away. I offered to do it outside, but he didn't want to be anywhere near it, and caused a bit of a stir. I removed the brains, rinsed them in cold water, boiled them for half an hour to set them, then fried them and served them as an hors d'oeuvre before dinner. Brains have a unique, creamy texture that a few of us really got into. But most people's idea at the horror of eating brains overshadowed the actual flavor of the dish. I also removed the eyeballs, as several recipes directed. I imagined eyeballs as delicate, like little fragile balloons filled with liquid, so I initially approached my task with caution and gentleness. But soon I was using force. I slipped a small dessert spoon behind the eye to pry it out of its socket, then grabbed the very solid eye with my hand and used a knife to cut it away from the muscles holding it in place. I'm not recounting these graphic details to gross you out. This is part of the reality of the meat most of us love to eat, and it's good to get real. Before you start, remove any remaining bristles from the head. It's easier to singe them off with a flame than to scrape them from a disembodied head. Then place the head and any other meat scraps into a stock pot and cover with water. Add vinegar to help extract collagen and minerals from the bones and cartilage. Season with salt, peppercorns, hot chili pepper, sage, and other seasonings you like, and gently boil for at least 5-6 hours, or until the flesh falls away from the bones. But boiling for even longer is even better. Skim off any scum that rises to the surface in the initial period of boiling. If you're leaving the stock boiling for long periods, keep it covered. But if you're checking on it regularly, let it boil uncovered so the stock will reduce. Okay, so I need a break.
Oh, gosh.
After boiling, strain the stock through a colander to separate the liquid from the solids. Once the solids cool, pick through them with your fingers and separate out from the meat from the fat and bones.
You okay?
Keep whatever you can pick that feels soft. You can keep strips of skin and gristle to chew on or not. There's lots of meat in a head. Once you have picked off all the meat, discard the bones and the fat. Next, skim the fat off the stock. Fat rises to the top and can be gently removed using a ladle. Transfer the fat to a can where it will solidify. You can use it in cooking. This fat is rich in collagen. Souse will be mostly meat, like a meatloaf, with a small amount of stock added to hold it together, or it can be made with a greater proportion of stock as more of a gelatinous aspic, with bits of meat floating in it. Heat however much the stock you want to use. Add the picked off meat to it, simmer for 15 minutes, and then season to taste. Transfer the mixture to loaf pans, spread it evenly, chill in the refrigerator to set it. Use the extra stock for soups or stews. And that's how you make head cheese.
Now you know why Chris Hanna wrote this song about making head cheese out of him.
Yeah. It's absolutely disgusting. So what's really interesting about this book is that Katz is saying all this stuff, and all he wants me to, all it's like encouraging me to do is just continue being a vegetarian, because that is like so disgusting to read about, him like sawing the head in half and like popping out the eyeballs. I'm just like, just shut up. And I know I was reading all that, and I was like telling myself, just stop reading this. Like, this is so gross. And I'm sorry to everybody out there that I included the whole thing. I just think it's important to go into minute detail on this song, because it's such a complicated song, even though it's so short.
And I had head cheese in Ukraine. I got it served to me for breakfast, and I read about it before I arrived, and it was just the gelatinous loaf piece that looked like it would have been pork with carrots and celery in it, and they covered it in mustard. And this is for breakfast. So I, kindly took a bite to try to be a good house guest. So Michael Pollan, if you're listening, I did my part, and I took a bite, and I couldn't do it. And I thought about maybe putting it in a napkin and, chucking it to the first stray dog I saw.
Yeah, you're going to do the Seinfeld mutton thing.
Yeah. But then I thought, they're going to think I liked it if I ate it, and the piece was gone. So I just had to explain, look, I feel really bad telling you no, but I can't eat this. I tried, but I can't do it.
Yeah, it's I'm like thoroughly grossed out right now. Like, I'm sitting here and my stomach is like doing kind of flips a little bit after having read all of that. So Chris goes on in the song to say, a rationale so moronic it defies belief. Post-vegetarian, I must submit to you respectfully. Be careful what kind of world you wish for. Someday may come knocking on your door. And what's really interesting about this is this term post-vegetarian. And I was wondering about this. So I did I searched for the term within the ebook, and the book states on page 267 and 268 that most of us return to various stages of omnivorousness and post-vegetarianism. So what they're saying is, you're going to quit being a vegetarian. Like, that's what he's basically saying.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, is that true? How many people go back? I know it would be a lot. But I found an article in Psychology Today and another one in the Smithsonian Magazine, which states that 84% of people who go vegetarian or vegan lapse within a year. So in this regard, the lyrics are pointing the mirror back at all people who have lapsed, and asks everyone to get it together and commit for humane purposes, for compassionate purposes, for environmental purposes, for bodily purposes, etc. So I was wondering about that post-vegetarian term, and it sure enough pops up a couple times in the chapter.
Yeah, I'm going to jump back one lyric, because my favorite in the whole song is, because I believe that one can only relate with another living creature by completely destroying it, especially with the description of making head cheese. This is my favorite line. It's one that shows our disconnect with the natural world and the animals that we raise in captivity. And I never appreciated anything about food with meat except for the next bite. And eating meat didn't teach me any lessons about connecting with nature. It didn't teach me about valuing the idiosyncrasies of domesticated species. I saw food as my right, and just that's just the way it is sort of thinking. And I didn't allow myself to think any further about my choices and the suffering tethered to my choices. And that line reminds me a lot of a quote from a playwright. I don't remember how to say his last name. It's William Inge. He said, "We have enslaved the rest of the animal creation and have treated our distant cousins in fur and feathers so badly that beyond doubt, if they were able to formulate a religion, they would depict the devil in human form."
Dude.
And that is a motivator every
Yeah.
time I walk through the grocery store.
Yeah.
And things like that remind me why I don't eat meat.
Yeah. Well, and, with regards to that, we are destroying all of the habitats of the animals that exist in nature. Like, we are essentially the devil to the world. Like, that to me is like not a controversial thing to say, And like the other day, you even texted me a picture saying that you almost bought like a meat and pea protein hybrid burger. Can you tell me more about this?
Yeah, I was grabbing the Beyond Burgers at the grocery store, and it's in the meat section. This is Indiana for you.
Yeah.
This is the Midwest, where the meat-free stuff is literally in the same open coolers, spewing cool air into an open building, right, and wasting energy. But it's right next to it, and it's like the vegetarian stuff, and then there was a blend of Angus beef with pea protein, which I don't get what the point of that was. And then right next to that was just, regular beef. I almost grabbed that thinking, that because the packaging is the same exact thing. It looked just like the stuff from Beyond, but I picked it up and was like, wait a second. Oh, no, you don't.
Oh, man. So, after like reading this Katz chapter and listening to this song a ton of times and thinking about my own like unwillingness to participate in like the meat slaughter aspect of it while still consuming some dairy, even though with each passing year it makes my stomach hurt more and more. Like whenever I eat ice cream, like I feel like I'm dying.
Yeah.
So I'm not able to or interested in consuming meat, but I wanted to find some thoughts and comments from other people about this particular song. And I found this article in the Vegetarian Star from 2009, and there are tons of reader comments in this song. And some of them are like totally on the people on Katz's side. So here's one. This is absurd and scary. Sandor Katz and his books and writing have revolutionized vegetarian cooking and vegetarian health. Are these idiots going to write a disturbing, violent song about the author of The Joy of Cooking or any other cookbook that features meat? I can't, I can think of way more harmful ways of thinking than Katz's. Seriously, guys, you got to pick your battles. Sandor Katz is totally on your team. Here's another one. This band, like most PETA members and apologists, are mentally disturbed morons. You idiots supporting this need to seriously reconsider your values, and every last one of you owes a personal apology to Mr. Katz. Here's another one. I think Sandor Katz is awesome. So too is Propaganda, but I have to agree with the above statement that Propaganda needs to pick their battles. I mean, why not dedicate a song to a company engaged in exploitative factory farming than a radical queer gardener and fermenter who is as passionately dedicated to eliminating factory farming as most vegans? It just doesn't make sense. So like, I would be totally curious to hear Chris's reflections on this song 11 years on. Because I mean, I love this song. It's an amazing song, but like the more I like learn about all of this, the more like confused I am. Do you know what I mean? Like
it complicates it for sure.
Yeah. Do you have any other thoughts about the lyrics of this song before we kind of wrap it up?
Yeah, I think Chris clearing his throat is really clever. It kind of interrupts the previous ideas that have been laid out to provide a short but adequate counter to the arguments for quote unquote humane meat. And it's, for me, like it's kind of common to get insects in my classroom at school, usually spiders, which of course the students just want to step on.
Yeah.
And they're baffled that I usually just scoop them up and I put them in the hall or out my classroom window before they can intervene and step on them. And I don't always get the response that I want, but I try to ask them to think about how they'd want to be treated if something crossed their path that could figuratively step on them, a larger, stronger person, a dangerous animal. And, that just a little bit of kindness and compassion when you have the upper hand is never a bad thing.
Yeah. And, and like that reminds me of something else that I was thinking about, like from my other podcast and like my teaching in religious studies about the Jain concept of ahimsa.
Mhm.
For anybody who knows about Jains are arguably the most peaceful people in the entire world. And oftentimes Jain monks and nuns will walk through the streets with brooms, and they'll sweep the sidewalk in front of them just to clear the sidewalk of any bugs that they may accidentally step on, because their goal of their life is to reduce and eliminate all of their baggage karma. So, that really intrigues me as well about the idea of killing on purpose, like swatting at bugs, because in some cultures of the world, that bug has a soul, an atman, and a self, essentially. And if we just stomp on things because, ew, it's a nasty bug, then that bug's being, its atman, attaches itself to us like a speck of dust. And the more specks of dust that attach to us because of the things that we needlessly kill, the more karma we accumulate, and then the worse circumstance we're reborn into in our reincarnated life after we die. You know what I mean? So the more things that you stomp on needlessly, the more karma you accumulate, the worse your rebirth is, if you believe in reincarnation.
I have a lot of that to undo from my childhood, unfortunately.
Yeah, me too. A lot of I did the whole magnifying glass thing over the bugs when I was a little kid. A lot of shame. Anyway, so did you find any good YouTube comments or anything like that about this song?
Yeah, one said, "Don't eat meat, or propaganda will eat you."
I found one that said, "Preachy as hell."
Yeah, a lot of them are not very positive.
Yeah, the YouTube comments are not that good on this song.
Of course, because it's this topic. Another for a live version of it said, "Not a single phone in the air, just as it has to be." So it was nice to hear about something other than the topic. But I do miss that, seeing live music and people without phones.
Yeah. And here's another one. What else do you expect from whiny vegans?
Of course, yeah.
And then another person said, "A search for head cheese got me here." Woo! Which I thought was awesome. So Keith, what does this song teach you? What does it ask you to consider as you move forward with your life?
Well, I think that given meat consumption has consistently fallen in the United States, and based on the not too optimistic attrition rates that you shared, on fledgling vegetarians and vegans, I think almost certainly the number has fallen because of things like Meatless Mondays.
Yeah.
Probably not just people who are completely abstaining. That has had a greater impact, from omnivores who have changed up their diets and reduced things than perhaps like all the vegetarians and vegans combined, which translates to less suffering and less inhumane treatment. And I was thinking a lot about Temple Grandin, who I teach about in my class, who worked to reform slaughterhouses, and who she's done more to decrease suffering than me, a guy who just eats tofu and seitan. So I think it's our collective efforts to reduce suffering. Any reduction is good, and we, including myself, can always do better.
Yeah, I get what Katz is trying to do with this book. He's trying to acknowledge the reality of meat as a part of the world's diet, while also pushing us away from the disgraceful conditions in which animals are raised and humans work. You mentioned earlier the insanely dangerous conditions in slaughterhouse work, which is something we didn't even talk that much about, but I hope that we will in future episodes on food for this show. I respect the work that folks like Katz and Pollen are doing to encourage people to eat less meat, because this is a hard topic. Changing an entire ingrained culture for hundreds of millions of people is so unbelievably difficult. I think people should quit eating meat, but I also feel pretty powerless to make that happen. And I'm with you that incremental change is good. Any reduction is good. And I would encourage anybody out there who's listening, if you need some assistance in, becoming a little more meat free in your life, email me at propagandipod@gmail.com, because I will literally send you recipes that are delicious and filling and will take you 30 minutes to cook. Like, I've got a massive collection of vegetarian cookbooks. Hit me up. And we can all do a little better, like, for real. And this is like a satirical song. He's not saying he's going to actually murder somebody. It's just trying to get you to see the logic from the animal's perspective of, like, wanting to survive. It's pretty simple. What would you rate this song?
I'm going to give this song a 3.5. There are a number of different ways to write a meaningful track about animal rights, and I think this is a really unique take on it.
Mm-hmm.
I know all the words. I never skip it. I think it has some really unique musical elements, but I don't think I'd lose my gourd if they played it live. I'd rather hear Lower Order or Potemkin City Limits or Purina.
I'm going to give this song a 4. It's a fantastic song. The music is amazing. The lyrics are hilarious. The solo rips, the feel of the song, and it's like multiple movements that I mentioned is really fantastic. I also kind of feel a little badly for Sandor Katz, because he seems like a good dude working within the reality of the culture in which he was born and raised to incrementally do a little bit better. I think that his writing on boiling heads and the killing scenes in the book are completely disgusting. And I know for a fact that I have no interest in killing anything myself. So if anything, his book just entrenched my own vegetarianism. But I was just immensely grossed out by huge portions of his chapter. But so I think that, he was an interesting target to pick for this song. I don't really know how I feel about it beyond that, because now I know so much about the guy that it just feels like it feels weird. But I'm going to give it a 4. So thank you so much for listening to our episode on humane meat, the Flensing of Sandor Katz. This was a very strange feeling episode for me. A lot of weird stuff that we found for this one. So hopefully you got something out of this. We'll be talking more about food in the future. So I'm sure that you'll get more out of this in the future from us. But this was I don't know, Keith, how did you feel about this one? Was this kind of a weird one for you?
It was a little just uncomfortable, and again, having a lot to address. And I also have to say I learned a lot from your research. So I feel better, definitely.
Well, if you want to hit us up, you could find us on email at propagandipod@gmail.com. You could find us on Twitter and Instagram at propagandipod. Thank you again to Lindsay McDougall from Frenzal Rom for that insanely cool cover and the great chat. Love talking to Lindsay. I actually talked to him at 5 a.m. New York time to be on this show. So
nice. Hopefully
everybody can appreciate the fact that I suffered for you and pre-made my coffee the night before. But thank you everybody for listening, and we will see you next time.
Be careful what kind of world you wish for. Someday